Chapter 82, The Angel of the Lord. Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 to 25. Behold, I send an angel before thee, to keep thee in the way, and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared. Beware of him, and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice, and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries. For mine angel shall go before thee, and bring thee in unto the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them, and quite break down their images. And ye shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. Exodus chapter 23, verses 20 to 25. The angel of the Lord is the subject of these verses. We are told that the covenant people shall have with them the protecting person of the angel of the Lord. Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, refers to this fact and speaks of one who followed, or literally went with Israel in their journey. That person is referred to as that spiritual rock. That rock was Christ. The word rock is important in biblical usage. It is an image or representation of God whenever used in a non-literal sense. We have this meaning in the hymn, Rock of Ages. Moses in his hymn says of God, He is the rock, that is, the foundation of all things. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 4. He declares of Israel that he lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 15. And of the pagans and their gods Moses said, For their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 31. In brief, the supernatural presence of God was with Israel in its wilderness journey. This supernatural presence was manifested on specific occasions, both before and after the wilderness experience. When three men appeared to Abraham in Genesis chapter 18, verse 2, etc., one is set apart as God himself. The angel of the Lord is God, but not God the Father. In Genesis chapter 24, verse 7 and verse 40, a distinction is made between God and the angel of the Lord. However, in Exodus chapter 13, verse 21, we are told that the Lord went before Israel. But in Exodus chapter 14, verse 19, we read that it was the angel of the Lord. Thus, God the Father and the angel of the Lord are both identified and distinguished. In Joshua chapter 5, verses 14 and 15, and Joshua chapter 6, verse 2, it is clear that the angel of the Lord is God. In Zechariah chapter 1, verses 14 and 15, the angel of the Lord and the Lord communicate one with another, but in Zechariah chapter 3, they are identified. In Judges 13, verses 19 to 22, the angel of the Lord is declared to be God. It is clear that the angel of the Lord is not a creature, but is truly God. We have in these theophanies, or appearances of God, the pre-incarnation manifestations of God the Son, human in form, but not incarnate. The word angel here is a messenger, but he is a messenger in the sense of a presence from the high command, from God. He is there to protect, lead, and chasten. He is the great guardian angel, God with his people. Then, as now, men assume that it is God's business to care for his people when needed and to be silent at all other times. As a result, in verse 21, a blunt warning is given. Beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. My name is in him means God's authority, nature, and power are in him, as MacGregor observed. This is a description of a person who is God. Because God's name or person is in the angel of the Lord, rebellion against him is not forgiven. He will not pardon your transgression. Such a transgression is a rebellion against salvation. It means that their deliverance from Egypt and the Red Sea threats meant nothing more to them than the freedom to sin at will. Men find God and faith necessary because without them life has no meaning. But to assume that we have no requirement of total obedience to God, or to assume that faith does not require obedience, is to manifest presumption, not salvation. There is then no pardon. Hence the command is, provoke him not. By contrast, verse 22 is a magnificent promise to those who believe and obey, to the faithful. God says, Then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries. God will then identify ourselves with his cause and kingdom, and will deliver and prosper us. These blessings come to us with submission to the Lord and his law word. We are led by God when we submit to him. Joseph Parker said of all of us, It would seem to be our nature to spoil everything. We take the instrument to pieces to find the music instead of yielding ourselves to the call of its blast, to the elevation of its inspiring gladness, and to the infinite tenderness of its benediction. We are cursed with the spirit of vain curiosity. We expend ourselves in the asking of little questions instead of plunging into God's great sea of grace and love and comfort, and waiting patiently for revelations which may address themselves to the curiosity which is premature, and to the prying which now can get no great answers. The angel of the Lord will convoy his people to a prepared place, but if they distrust his leading and break his law, he will judge them. The promises here are very great. In these verses and those that follow, a series of remarkable promises are made by God. These carry his absolute certainty and power, so that they express not hopeful forecasts, but certainties. Lange has summarized them thus. 1. Protection of angelic guidance, of the religion of revelation, and invincibility founded on religious obedience. 2. Victory over the Canaanites. Possession of the Holy Land on condition of their purifying the land from idolatry. 3. Abundance of food. 4. Blessing of health. 5. Fertility of man and beast. 6. Long life. 7. The respect and fear of neighbouring peoples. 8. Mysterious control of natural forces in favour of Israel. Verse 28. 9. The subjected Canaanites themselves made to serve for the protection of the growth of Israel. 10. Wide extent of territory and sure possession of it on condition of not mingling with the Canaanites and their idolatry. The promises unto us are no less, and we are more often foiled by our own sin than by our enemies. The promise in verse 23 is that the angel of God's presence will go before his people to cut off, or better, to cut down their enemies. Canaanite rule would come to an end, and Israel's enemies would be stateless, and their status determined only by residence in Israel. God's people, however, must have nothing to do with the idolatry of these foreign peoples. While no compulsion was exerted to secure compliance to Israel's faith, and the various peoples of Canaan could believe as they willed, public and state sanction was denied to their pagan religions. Verse 24. The community had to be governed in terms of God and His law. They were required, in particular, to destroy all the pagan images or pillars or obelisks which were found everywhere. They were fertility cult symbols which invoked the fertility of natural forces. These were erected to ensure the fertility, potency, and plenitude of men and their crops. As against this, God's people, verse 25, must recognize that God's blessings alone can prosper man in his person and work. Obedience, God says, means health and plenty, whereas disobedience means judgment and death. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, we have a fuller statement of this fact. The promise is very plain. The better the obedience, the better the health, in every sphere of life. However, for God's people who receive His grace, mercy, and care, to despise His word means particularly severe judgments. Covenant faith is therefore entrance into a realm of unrivaled benefits and blessings, as well as especially severe judgments. We are commanded, "Ye shall serve the Lord your God," and when we do, "He shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee." Verse 25. This promise of the present is not simply a matter of history. Our Lord tells us, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. This is the same presence with the same power, the same blessings, and the same judgments